Hello, my name is Adam Nathan. I lead worldwide technologies, utility and energy practice, working with some of the largest industrial companies in the US and around the world to digitally transform, leverage the full stack of technology to transform their operations, improve, reduce outages, reduce cost, and improve outcomes. I'm also an advisory board member for IndustrialML, and I'm here with Arjun Chandar, the CEO. Arjun, thanks for having this chat with me.
Absolutely, Adam. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, and I've been working with Arjun for the last couple of years and really believe that IndustrialML is taking an innovative approach to helping this centuries-old industry of manufacturing digitally transform and navigate the complex waters of leveraging IoT and analytics to improve operations. So why don't we start with at the beginning, why is digitally transforming manufacturing worthwhile?
Well, there are a lot of reasons why, of course. The ability for factories to improve critical financial metrics, the ability for workers to be able to multitask more readily and to acquire skills that allow them to change with the times a little bit more effectively. All of those things, of course, matter. But I'd say one of the biggest reasons for doing digital transformation that's become, pretty, I'll say noticeable with the people that we talk to is that workforces are aging. Most of the people who have worked in manufacturing have been in the same company for decades. And, now the baby boomer generation's retiring, and people of our generation aren't necessarily looking to fill in those jobs. So, there's a lot of discussion about how automation is taking jobs away, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some degree to which that was true over the last couple of decades. But right now, digital transformation is more about needing to backfill knowledge and ability to track things on your production floor that is being lost and can't be replaced with the fact that with the reality that workforces are now starting to diminish a little bit. So being able to continue your operations under conditions like that, and in fact expand your operations under conditions like that, is perhaps the biggest value to implementing a digital transformation in your factory.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talk about the gray tsunami that's coming from manufacturing, and the machine whisperers that can listen to a machine and understand diagnose what's wrong with it. You can't. You need to find a way to codify that. Absolutely. And so, but we've been talking about this for a decade, right? The Industrial 4.0 was supposed to digitize everything, in 2010. Why is this so hard?
I think, again, there are multiple stages to that answer. Of course, there's the just general capital cost issue. You need to have sensors. You need to build out your network with all of the appropriate security practices. You need to have data environments on hand. You need to be able to apply analytics, do all of those things, and you need to educate your personnel so that they are, tech savvy enough to be able to utilize all of these things. And certainly in the early days of the company, those are all elements that we emphasize as potential risks in our growing out our company, and also huge opportunities. Like, we could help companies do all of these things, and that was a big part of our value. But kind of the second stage to the answer is ultimately, even if there are tons of possibilities of what you can do with digital transformation, they only can really come to fruition if you as a factory know what it is that you want to accomplish and can set about accomplishing that. And oftentimes, especially with small to medium-sized manufacturers, the reason why they fall behind in industrial IoT implementation is they don't necessarily know which problem it is that they want to solve. And part of the reason for that is because they haven't been tracking their data digitally for a long time. It's difficult for them to even identify or measure what their biggest operating problems are. And I think partly as a consequence of that, digital transformation has been largely limited to larger companies, where even if they don't necessarily know what their problems are, it's easier for them to implement solutions that only sort of piecewise solve small problems, but that still has a big bottom line impact. I think one of the biggest challenges that needs to be overcome, especially with those smaller manufacturers, is helping them navigate through that period of, that first bit of data collection helps you identify what your problems are, and then you can get to the next step of solving them.
Absolutely. Yeah, the discovery is often a huge hurdle. I guess, so why, after a decade of talking about it, and we recognize that there's a lot of complications and hurdles, but the biggest companies in the industrial world, some of the biggest, you look at the GEs and the Siemens, they have tried to solve this. Why hasn't that worked? Why isn't everything digitized by the biggest organizations?
So obviously, you can find plenty of case studies about both Predix and MindSphere, and they went to the market in slightly different fashions. I think one of the biggest issues that even companies as big as GE or Siemens or PTC encounter is they tend to be more generalist platforms where they're attempting to cater to every manufacturer. And the problem with building yourself out that way is, while that makes it a lot easier for you to work with some of the largest manufacturers in the world, it means that oftentimes you're forced to put in an undue amount of effort to even reach a small or medium-sized manufacturer, which has less purchasing power to begin with. So one of the things that we've noticed with the customers that we've talked to in the steel industry, in the plastics industries, in the paper industry, is they place a lot of value on working with partners who actually know their space, not necessarily people who say, okay, we understand manufacturing. Honestly, if you go to an industrial IoT company's website and you see that they have separate sections for like transportation and supply chain and manufacturing, that's generally a red flag that they're not trying to cater to like a specific industry's needs very well. And there's a much higher degree of trust that a small or mid-sized factory is going to feel from somebody who they knows their industry. So there's a bit of a challenge that the largest companies face in trying to seem like specific experts to different manufacturing industries, while at the same time wanting to cater to as many of them as possible. And I think one potential way to mitigate that, at least at a macro level, is by having more companies that are industry experts and can build on an industry by industry basis, rather than just trying to build outright for all manufacturers at once.
Yeah, I think the way I've seen it work is, because of the technology is arguably the easy part. It's getting the operators and engineers to understand to identify what the actual use cases are, what would be valuable, getting that information, doing the analysis, and then actually serving it back to them in a way that actually it achieves that value. And
Right.
so that we see it being very much more of a bottom up than a top down. There's no one technology platform that just solves everything. You need to come with an opinion of what is the exact problem that you're solving, exactly how will it be ingested or used by the operators or the control room or whoever's involved. So couldn't agree more.
So one other thing that I also want to point out is that doesn't mean that it's inherently impossible to build a platform that can cater to a wide number of manufacturers. I think the fundamental point is there's not that big of a difference necessarily between like the terminology used in paper versus steel. They're very minor differences, but those very minor differences can seem very major to the people who are actually in the product day to day. And to the point of wanting to get buy-in from the bottom up, operators, engineers. Those very, very minute differences, despite perhaps having a platform that is, generally capable of doing largely the same stuff for all of them, that makes a big difference in ability to adopt.
Absolutely. So how do manufacturers, especially the small and mid-sized ones like you're talking about, that don't have the resources to go work with the biggest firms, how do they get started?
There's an old adage: think big but start small, in manufacturing, and I think that applies very well here. I don't think that you necessarily have to have a comprehensive industrial IoT strategy in order to get started down that pathway. It's certainly helpful if you do, and it's certainly helpful if all of the different initiatives that you're thinking about internally can be tied together. But you can still generate value without having any of those things in place. Your goal to start out is just identify some measurable problems so that, okay, let's put in a solution to solve this problem. If we're having an unusual issue with scrap going to customers and us losing customers, then let's put in a computer vision solution so that we can track what's good and what's bad, and more effectively measure out our scrap before we get any products out to the customer. Something like that, where there's a measurable problem and that you can solve it with a targeted solution. That's a totally valid place to start. But going back to what I was saying at the beginning, there are many small and medium-sized companies that don't even necessarily have the ability to identify those problems. Our beachhead, our beachhead partner, Daiwa Steel Tube Industries, one of the things that they've noted as an issue is they're not sure how many bad products necessarily go to their customers. They know that they generally produce very good product, and the percentages aren't necessarily that high. But when something is bad, they don't necessarily get a ton of customer feedback. They just risk losing the customer altogether. So, in their case, it's not necessarily that they have a measurable problem. It's the lack of ability to measure that is the problem. And especially for a small or medium-sized company where you have limited capital resources to expend, and you're reticent to spend them on things that you don't know are problems, there's a little bit of a cognitive switch that you might have to make, just to say, hey, being able to measure these things, we know is going to uncover some problems, and it's worth it to be able to do that. So measuring your operations as a first step, if you have no idea where to start, is still a worthwhile place to start.
Well, Arjun, I appreciate it. I look forward to continuing to work with you on this and future conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to doing this again, Adam. Thanks for having me.